Mr. Chair.
Okay, it's 3:31. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll start with a roll call. Scott?
Scott Shepherd here.
Mona LaPierre here.
Bill Irving here.
Peter Royce here. Okay, review of the minutes from November 12th, 2025. Any questions or comments?
Move to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, tax rate impact.
Okay, so in preparation for today's meeting and making a recommendation to the select board, Amy and I went through and we updated all of the relevant summary documents. I printed out a copy. You have a copy of all of them in front of you. There are certainly some specific items we need to talk about, like the compensation study and the operating budget and the warrant articles, but we wanted to start with an overview of where we're at in the process right now as it relates to 2026 property taxes. So if you actually look at the last 2 pages of what I printed for you, and Scott, for your benefit, I can get this up on the screen if you give me just a moment. I have them all open. It's going to be these 2 documents. So let me share my screen. Okay. So Frida, we were just getting started. Once you get settled in, I have printed copies. Oh, okay, terrific. The last printed copy, 2 copies that I gave you are the estimated tax rate impact and the tax rate impact by warrant article. So what we have here is this is a summary for the purposes of 2026 property tax setting, which again will happen in November of 2026. And what we see is that the operating budget appropriation increase at this point in time is $463,000. The warrant articles compared to the warrant articles which were funded from the tax rate last year are an increase of $215,000. You'll notice that there's a reduction in the war service credit of about $42,000, and that's because there was legislation this year that eliminated the ability to stack the service-connected total disability credit and the all-veteran credit. And so that essentially reduces the total credit amount that service-connected total disability credit recipients will receive.
So you said that was state who did that?
Yep.
Okay.
The state legislature. Yeah, so I do expect a petitioned warrant article to increase the service-connected total disability credit from the current maximum of $4,000 to the new maximum, which happened in the same legislation, of $5,000. So we haven't received that yet, but I do anticipate that we'll receive that. Overlay staying the same. Total revenue is about an increase of $4,000. Again, we're being conservative here to make sure that we capture any reduction in the interest on investments and other things there. Fund balance to reduce taxes. Based on our fund balance projections, we'll have about $161,000 surplus unassigned fund balance. That's above the 12.5% midpoint of the range that we target. So the tax effort goes up a total of $608,000, and with a total tax base of $1.923 billion, the tax rate in 2020, municipal tax rate in 2026 would be $3.67, an increase of 28 cents. So when we did this, finalizing the 2025 operating budget and warrant, we estimated, you'll remember, the increase to be 56 cents based on the information available at the time. Fortunately, over the last year, we collected more non-property tax revenue than we estimated when we set the warrant, and so the increase was 40 cents instead of 56 cents. So as a matter of scale, the proposal that went to voters last year was a total of 56 cents. The proposal, as it stands right now, is 28 cents. The actual increase in 2025 was 40 cents for the municipal rate. So I think, sorry, go ahead.
Do you anticipate that going down then? The 28 cents going
I think
down?
this is a reasonable estimate.
Okay.
Based on the available information.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I think it's probably just as likely that interest rates could drop to the floor next year as that we saw additional revenue this year. I think Amy and I have really focused on doing our best possible job at estimating revenues for the purposes of taxes. So we have in your packet a copy of our updated revenue estimate, so you can kind of see where we're pulling levers. It's not overly conservative. You remember Barrington for years underestimated revenue and collected much more than what was budgeted. And so that all went into unassigned fund balance, and then it was spent at town meeting, and we got in this cycle. We don't do that anymore. Where we budget a lot closer, but there's still opportunity for swings. Yeah, good question. So the reason we start here with tax impact, because these are all the numbers. This factors all of the components of the municipal tax rate. And so you can see for the total of the operating budget in the warrant articles, the increase is 28 cents of what's proposed right now. So we also have done our best effort to appropriately allow residents to make informed decisions when voting on warrant articles. And so this is a document we created a couple of years ago, which shows by warrant article what the increase is. And one of the additions from last year was we don't just show what the increase is, but we also show what portion of the total estimated 2026 tax rate each article will represent. And so the reason that's important is because when you're building off last year's rate in terms of comparing what is the increase over last year's rate, you need to understand that that's only part of the equation. And so what we do is we take, there were $735,000 last year, which were funded by the tax rate through separate warrant articles. And the operating budget obviously was funded by the tax rate also. So that is the combination of all of those appropriations is well above even just the operating budget in terms of what the tax rate can fund. So if we go back to that summary page, we're really only looking at another $608,000 in terms of tax effort, $608,000 more to be funded by the tax rate in 2026 than 2025. So we need to distribute that increase equally among all of the warrant articles to accurately represent what the tax rate impact would be. And so in so doing, the first column you see total appropriation amount. That's the total amount requested at this moment in time. The portion of the 2026 tax rate, so just the operating budget would be $3.26. Our current tax rate is $3.39. And then each of the warrant articles below would add, or in one case, subtract that amount. And that's where you end up with a $3.67 tax rate at the bottom. Now, the estimated increase, this is what would be listed in the warrant article. And this is where I feel like it probably gets a little bit confusing because, again, we only have $600,000 of additional tax effort that we're distributing. And so what we did is we took the total appropriation amount and distributed that essentially proportionally to the increases, so that even though the heavy equipment capital reserve would represent 13 cents on the tax rate, it's really only an increase of about 9 cents because the tax rate already carries a portion of that appropriation. So the reason the operating budget shows zero is because the operating budget is the only non-discretionary one. So the operating budget's going to happen every year anyways. And so each of the separate warrant articles is a discretionary warrant article where there's no default. If it fails, and it's not there. And so because the $3.26 for the operating budget is less than the current approved tax rate of $3.39, then there's no increase. If that article passes and everything else passes, the total increase is 28 cents. So anyways, the estimated increase to the tax bill is $119, and then the estimated total tax bill, if you own an average valued property of $425,000, is $1,560. So you see the notes there where it talks about that $735,000 of additional separate warrant articles. It also talks about distributing that $161,000 of unassigned fund balance. None of that is applied to the operating budget. That's just applied to the separate warrant articles, consistent with how we've evolved our use of the unassigned fund balance. But that happens at tax rate setting, not in the warrant articles. And then it's based on the 1.923 billion of valuation, and the estimated tax bill is based on a $425,000 home. So happy to answer questions or talk about this, but I wanted folks to understand that this is where, from the progress we've made in the budget development process such far, this is where we stand.
What's the current tax rate?
Municipal, $3.39. And if you look at the page before, you can see that listed at the bottom left. So the first column is
Oh, yeah, I'm
2025.
sorry.
Yep, no, that's okay. That's how you can compare current numbers to essentially projected numbers. And as always, for the purposes of understanding the anticipated tax rate, we have assumed that all of the warrant articles will pass. Obviously, that's not necessarily always the case. And so that would obviously affect the tax rate also. And the reason that we give a breakout by warrant article is so folks can understand, if a warrant article doesn't pass, how much is that likely to reduce the tax rate, projected tax
What's
rate.
the estimated tax bill this year that people are paying as of December for just the municipal part?
Yep, so we would do 425 times 339. So $1,440. And so that's where you get the increase of $119.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yep, of course.
Is 425,000 still a good estimate?
It
I
is.
don't think it is.
So in your budget binder, if you flip to the tax rate page, and I can pull it up on the screen, we calculate this every year for this exact reason. People often confuse the average market value of property in Barrington for the average assessed value of property in Barrington. So our assessed values right now are trending about 20% below the market value, which is why we plan to do a revaluation in 2026 to correct that, because that isn't where we should be. And so what we do is we collect the data on all of the dwelling units, residential units in Barrington, the condos, the houses, everything, and mobile homes, and we divide that out to find out what the mean and median is. And so, sorry for the delay, but I'll pull up the average home calculation that we did for 2026. And it's not surprising that it didn't change, because we haven't done a revaluation in the last year. So values are, even though these houses are selling for $900,000, they're assessed at $750,000 because they're assessed at values which are essentially 20% lower than market value. So let me pull this up. It's in the tax rate chapter, which is 11, and we're looking at the average home calculation. So it's document 11C. Hopefully come up here. So what we have here is we have single family homes, mobile homes, and condominiums. We have the mean price, the mean assessed value of those properties, and the median assessed value for those properties. We have the amount, this is the count of single family, mobile home, and condos. And then we have a weighted percentage of what portion of the total that makes up to give the weighted mean and the weighted median. And so the weighted mean of home values in Barrington is 431, and the weighted median is 408. And so we've maintained the 425,000. Certainly, if there's different methodology that this group would recommend, we can consider it.
I mentioned to you somewhere in the last year, I thought the weighted mean might be better by using the actual dollar value rather than the frequency. But it's a matter of how you see it, I guess.
Well, I mean, you could do that, and I don't think the numbers would change a lot. So if you did the mean just based on dollar values, 248 plus 156,797 plus 325, 923 divided by 3, that's 323,000. So I think that would be artificially low if you just did an average of the actual median values without weighting them. Does that make sense? Or how would you do it different?
I'd take the 488, 248 and divide by the total. It would give it a lower number, wouldn't it?
Right. So, I mean, even if we just did single-family homes and ignored mobile homes and condominiums, which I think would be disrespectful to the 600 property owners that's their experience, there isn't a big difference between 425 and the 488 or 466 between the median of the single-family homes. Now, I would expect that to go up about 20% following the revaluation next year, and we'll update these numbers, and we will have an updated average home value. Good question, though.
Just to be clear for everyone, and that then reduces the tax rate appropriately, right?
If all other things are
Then-
equal,
Yep.
which they aren't necessarily. So the two big things that'll happen during a revaluation, which could affect, your mileage may vary. The first thing is if spending increases, if appropriations increase 5%, say, and values increase 20%, then you can expect the tax rate to decrease 15%, the net of the difference. So it isn't necessarily the same amount. If you go to the presentation in chapter 1, initial budget presentation, I have a slide on the budget history, and I show the value changes in the years that we've done revaluations. And if you do the math, the values went down, or the values went up 20%, the tax rate came down 18%. So taxes went up 2%. So the second reason your mileage may vary is if the average value increase in town is 20%, but for mobile homes, the average is 50%, which is similar to what we saw during the last revaluation. I don't anticipate it in the same way this year. Now you're redistributing the tax responsibility disproportionately to categories of properties. We saw during the last revaluation when values changed 30%, we saw the average value change for commercial of 5%, which means our commercial property taxpayers ended up paying less in taxes than they did before because that's the market value. That's how we assess property taxes, based on market value, and the market value for commercial properties was down following COVID. So that's another area, Scott, where your mileage may vary depending on how the revaluation redistributes the value in town. But averages, we're talking 20%, and the tax rate would go down a corresponding amount minus approved appropriation increases. Okay, other questions about the tax rate impact documents? Obviously, this is a huge source of pride, hopefully for you all. I know it is for the select board and myself, the level of transparency. Our duty is to allow residents to make informed decisions. And obviously, this is the same information that's listed on the warrant articles, and that is critically important, especially at a time right now when people are getting the bills for the things they voted on, to be able to, that it isn't, I don't think it's possible for voters in Barrington to say, I wasn't able to be informed in the decisions that I was making on the town ballot, period. And so I don't think that can be said for every question that's on the ballot. But I think for the town ballot, we spend a tremendous amount of effort allowing residents to be informed voters. At the end of the day, that's what a democracy is. Folks get to decide. We need to empower them to make informed decisions. So, okay, if we're ready to move on from this, so now that's the kind of conclusion in terms of where things are at right now, and that includes everything as it stands. Do we want to talk about the compensation study now? Total compensation study?
I do.
Great.
Well, thank you for all the work that you guys did.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
The comps were based on population, form of government, size of budget, income per capita, and location.
Correct.
Do you think that happened?
Yes.
Because Wyndham has a $21 million budget, a population of 16,000 or more. That's comparable. Summersworth is a city.
So let me look at Lee, though. So the thing about, sorry about that. The thing about that list is it is a collective, right? So you, on that spectrum, you have communities that are less than half the size of Barrington, like Lee, by all of those metrics. and you have communities like a Wyndham or Somersworth on the higher end. And so by collecting all of the data and averaging it, you're finding a collective of that range of municipalities. So that's the methodology.
You're using the same method?
That's the same list of communities that some of you that were around remember. We had a total compensation study committee in 2019. Steve Saunders, who was the chair of the budget committee, was actually on that committee. And so that one of the first items of business for that committee was to identify comparable communities. And so Steve Saunders and Tracy Hardikoff and the others on that committee selected the 10 communities, recommended that to the consultant and the select board. That was adopted, and we've used the same 10 communities. And obviously there's value in using the same cohort. We considered some other communities that might be more appropriate right now, but the value of having the same cohort of communities seemed to weigh out making a change. Scott, I know you had a lot of questions. I tried to address some of them. Do you have questions that persist?
Oh boy, where do I start? My view is that the Wyndham, I'm sorry, I'm not on my computer, the Wyndham is skewing the data. If I look, I understand you're comparing governmental employer by governmental employer, but if you just look at a couple, I tried to find things on the Stratford County document that you provided me, and I found a few things I can give you what they are. I'm not trying to cherry pick it, but I think that there are two that sort of illustrate where I think the Wyndham throws off data. So if you look at a light truck driver on the Stratford County employment and wages document, they say that an entry is 1486 and an experienced is 3210. And the consultant doesn't go up as high, but it starts at 2072 and goes up to 2787. And so that's a very, very different mix and what I think would be a more general or realistic light truck driver. Likewise, a heavy truck driver, I think we're at 2355 right now, it said, but the Stratford mean is, or the Stratford entry is 2454 and it goes up to 3212. Here, the consultant is closer, but it's always going higher. And that's what I find in every single one. There's one of these numbers are always higher. And I think looking at it, I didn't go through and do the calculations myself, but if you took off Wyndham, which does seem to be an outlier in a lot of cases, it gets back more into what we would expect. I guess ultimately, Connor, my view is that this is I'll just state, and I hope everyone understands this, I want our employees to be paid well, and we want to retain them. So I support a strong wage for them. I guess where I'm just getting tripped up is it just seems like we permanently raising the rates that we're giving people, because this is going to adjust the town from today until we ever do this again. And I think it's maybe a little bit skewed to the higher end, maybe because of Wyndham. And I just don't think that it's something that, just the wage scale as a whole, looking at it as being a 3% plus a step, even comes close to matching what is out there in the general marketplace. And so, as I've reflected on this, I think in some ways this is really a political decision that the ABC shouldn't have in a way, because it is just a political decision. And I'm wondering if maybe just leaving it to the select board is the right place to put that.
I think those comments are really helpful. Just a couple of things, and I know Mona has something as well. First, relative, and I know you said you're trying not to cherry pick, we don't have any light truck drivers. So that, we collected data on that because, we think it's possible in the future. But the heavy truck drivers and the positions, which these are the positions, which, like I said, I monitor these every year. The state puts out the numbers to see where we stand. And I think what the Stratford County data shows is very close, like remarkably close to what the market data shows for the applicable positions. Now, sure, there's some shifting, and with a pay plan, when you have 2.5% between steps on the beginning end or the high end, you're always going to round to that 2.5%. So like the heavy truck driver, the fact that their data says 2454 to 3212 and ours is 2461 to 3311, that's 98 cents on the high end. It's within the margin of that 2.5% for a step position. So I actually feel, and I feel quite strongly, that the state compensation data for applicable positions, which some of these are public sector only positions, which would factor in benefit levels, are remarkably close to what the consultants found in their wage study and what is recommended for classification placements. Relative to Wyndham, we actually, we asked the consultants to run a scenario where they excluded Lee and Wyndham. And Lee and Wyndham don't have all positions that we studied available, but not just excluding Wyndham, but also excluding Lee, which has half the population, 2/3 or 60% of the number of employees, and there's a lot of differences other than geography. And the data was not remarkably different by excluding essentially the top and the bottom of the data surveyed. And so I think, strong points can definitely be made about Wyndham and the applicable comparability of the community, but I think the same can be true for the data on the low end that we collected. And I think that's why we average. And so I think the problem with taking and saying, okay, let's study those 7 communities in the middle instead of the 9 is now for a lot more positions, you don't really have enough data points to provide valuable comparability for positions. And then to your last point about the political decision, it was this group that felt strongly last year that the select board should endeavor in this process and make sure that we're making data-driven decisions relative to employee total rewards and not just studying wages, but also studying benefits, which I'll point out that this total compensation study recommendation is reducing the top end of health benefits, not insignificantly, to balance the total rewards that were studied in the market. And so I think this group, the select board was eager to hear that recommendation from this group that we should do this. And I think similarly, the select board would be interested in an honest opinion from the budget committee about the implementation recommendations from the report. So I know Mona had something, and then
I have 2 things now. So in the last compensation study, was Wyndham is this the same 9 groups?
Yes.
And so I think that's important, that if you're going to compare apples to apples, you need to have the same communities. And I understand, Scott, what you're saying about Wyndham. I've been involved in compensation studies, and there's never, ever, ever a perfect fit for these, to get like communities in the public sector. They don't exist. So there is going to be some discrepancies. And the other thing you just mentioned was the health benefits and reducing that and tying them. I saw one of the recommendations was tying it to merit or something.
No, so what one of the things that we found in the data that the consultants gathered from the benefit survey was that our highest end health benefit was more generous than what the market provided. So they recommended a correction, eliminate that plan, offer the plan that's offered the same as elsewhere. The second component is more of a future-proofing the balance of wages and benefits from a total compensation standpoint. What the consultants aim to do in their recommendations is to balance our total rewards, wages and benefits with the labor market, and then in their recommendations, make recommendations to keep them balanced. What has happened over the last 3 years, say, is our wages have fallen below the labor market. And from what we studied, our benefits, specifically our health benefit, has risen above the labor market for total rewards. And so that's not a bad thing. Like, we could be the town that has great health benefits, and that sets us apart. The problem is that doesn't work for our part-time employees. The problem is when we're trying to attract a police officer, they're not reading the fine print on our health benefit. They're looking, where am I starting? Where am I going? And so that's why we look to balance our total rewards. So the recommendation relative to premium cost share, what the consultant said is, if you experience years in the future, not this year, but starting in 2027, where the health premium increase percentage is higher than the proposed wage percentage increase, then you're going to start getting out of balance more. And so what they've recommended doing is, say the health benefit increase is 7% and the proposed wage increase is 2.5%. Okay, so now there's a delta, and if you don't do anything and that compounds, then you're going to get imbalanced again. And so what they're recommending doing is saying, in that year, say the cost of living adjustment based on data is 2%. Inflation is 2%. So provide the 2% cost of living adjustment for employees, but at the same time, shift 2% of the premium cost share to employees correspondingly. So doing it that way will make sure that employees don't go backwards. Yes, employees that take the health benefit will have to use some of their cost of living adjustment to pay added cost of health benefits, but that raises wages and keeps benefits balanced so that we don't end up in a situation where the town is always covering the what sometimes could be exorbitant increases in health insurance. Now, what the consultants recommended is that that's capped at the increase of cost of living so that employees aren't expected to go backwards from a total reward standpoint based on health costs. So if health costs go up 10% and the cost of living adjustment is only 2%, only 2% of that premium cost share is going to be shifted to employees. But this is that recommendation was focused on future-proofing total rewards in Barrington so that they stay balanced. So that maybe in 3 years we don't have to pay for another study. We can just stay competitive relative to the labor market, but also balanced.
Okay, so I misspoke. It was tying future cost of living adjustments to a downward shift in the employee premium cost share.
Right.
So currently they, if I understand correctly, the employees do not pay anything towards their health insurance.
Incorrect. We have two plan options. The Cadillac plan option,
Yeah.
the town pays 85% of the premium, the employee pays 15% of the premium. That's the plan option which is proposed to go away and be replaced with a similar plan option, but different in a couple of key ways. The town has the second plan option, which is our kind of what's proposed to be our benchmark plan option. That is a deductible plan where the town pays 100% of the premium, but the employee pays 100% of the deductible. And so we can fund that plan in that way for actually fewer dollars than paying 85% of the top end plan. What's recommended here is we change the benchmark plan to be that site of service plan, which is the most popular plan by far, where the town would continue to pay 100%. But for the higher plan, now the employee just pays the difference. So there's no guaranteed percentage cost share with the higher tier plan. It's just the difference between the cost of this mid-tier plan and that plan. And then adding a third plan option for those employees who might not plan on any health utilization but don't want out-of-pocket costs if they do, where the town, it's a $3,000, $9,000 deductible. Town pays 100% of the premium and the first 50% of the deductible, and that's still less than the benchmark plan. So we're taking those health dollars, we're giving employees options so they can make the decision that's best for them. But again, the future proofing of that downshifting of premium cost share is to make sure that we don't end up imbalanced again.
Oh, I have a question. So what is the ABC's role and the compensation? You know, like, I mean, compensation for?
Yeah, I think the select board's interested in the opinion of the advisory budget committee as they consider implementing the recommendations from the compensation study. So I think they want to hear whether the advisory budget committee supports or doesn't support the recommendations of the consultant's report.
So we have a say into it. Just because.
Yeah, I guess for me, the real disconnect is the step, and it's not just where we start today. I don't know of any business that gives everybody a guaranteed 2.5% increase step automatically year over year. Plus, now they also get a cost of living adjustment. And it really means that if you look at average, say average interest rates have been 2%, say, let's go to the benchmark. That means that the budget can never go up less than 4.5%. And even with that, if I understand this correctly, the health insurance can go up further. So we're stuck in this 5% plus increase year over year. And the private sector doesn't work that way. And so I think public employees in this case are getting a better deal than all the taxpayers.
So you're making assumptions that aren't that don't withstand the test of time. So the point about a guaranteed step or a guaranteed cost of living adjustment, certainly in recent memory, that has been the practice of the select board supported by voters. But you don't have to go back very far in Barrington history where there was 7 years in a row where the select board and the voters didn't support any wage increases. And so it isn't, I don't think that you can just make that assumption that that's always the case. I think that process put Barrington behind based in, comparable communities. But I think at the same time, I don't feel that it is appropriate to compare private sector compensation packages with public sector compensation packages. And there's pros and cons, right? Everybody that works in that highway department could go out into the private sector right now with their CDL licenses and make wages twice as much as what they make right now, not even including overtime. But it's a different line of work. It's more stressful. The benefits are terrible. They'll be spending that money on benefits. And we offer a total compensation package which attracts employees that are looking for stability, that are looking for valuable benefits so that they can retire and have some level of pension, have good health insurance while they're working, be taken care of with short-term and long-term disability. So we offer the public sector. We offer a different product than the private sector. And you have to weigh all of those components of total compensation in order to appropriately evaluate them. And so the reason that we're comparing ourselves to the public sector is because our employees who choose to work in the public sector aren't likely to work in the private sector if they leave Barrington. Or when they're looking for a job, they're not likely to consider private sector versus public sector. They're going to consider public sector alternatives like the comparable communities listed. And so, that's the methodology for comparing Barrington to comparable public sector communities. And I think, certainly everything you're saying can be true about the private sector compensation packages, but I don't think that should weigh heavily on how the select board sets as a policy compensation approach for our employees.
But I think if I may, to Scott's point, every year we're looking at 4 to 5% increase just on step raises and cost of living. And that's before we add anything else in. And that's becoming a big hit.
I don't think it's sustainable, is my objection.
Yeah.
I don't think it's sustainable.
What is the alternative?
I don't know.
Okay.
The alternative, I guess, would be to, in some years, maybe not grant step raises, maybe not grant cost of living raises. I don't know what else, but the rate, as Peter said, the rate is.
The percentage is higher.
Yeah.
I think that at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is that Barrington as an organization is a customer service organization. and our people are the services that we provide, period. We don't, there's no goods, it is our people providing the services that we provide. And so, yes, absolutely, there's a very strong correlation to any increases in the cost of wages and benefits to the overall budget. It is the largest portion of the budget by far, to the tune of like 60 or 70% of the budget is wages and benefits. That isn't likely to change, right? So in terms of the operating budget, we have capital expenditures that we make through separate warrant articles. But I guess to the point of future decisions about step increases or cost of living adjustments, nobody in this room or even the select board can guarantee exactly what will happen in the future. So past performance isn't indicative of future returns, right? So the question before the budget committee right now and before the select board at the meeting on the 1st is, we invested in an objective review of where our wages and benefits compare to the labor market. There are recommendations to reduce the investment in benefits and increase the investment in wages in a way that balances our total rewards and brings it in line with the comparable communities. The question before the budget committee and the select board is, do you support the recommendations made by the consultant's report for implementing the total compensation study?
Something you,
It feels, it
Go
feels
ahead.
like shouldn't be automatic.
It isn't automatic. And like I said,
But
any
what I'm saying
future
that
step
The
progression,
reason for discussion is that it doesn't happen like this frequently.
what would make you feel like it doesn't feel automatic? Like what adjustment or change in what we're doing right now would make you feel less like it's automatic?
If it's the same percentage, year after year.
Which percentage? The step increase percentage or the cost of living adjustment percentage?
Probably cost of living
Mhm.
adjustment.
What is that tied to? Do we have a CPI?
Yep. So let's be clear about one thing first and foremost. There's no cost of living adjustment in the proposed implementation of the compensation study, right? This is an erase and replace of the pay plan based on the objective data they collected. In future years, the recommendation is to keep that pay plan current with inflation by using CPI data metrics, which they outline in here how they recommend approaching that, which is similar to what we've done in the past. They recommended that before, which is why we've done this. In the last 2 years, the cost of living adjustment data from the CPI and the Social Security cost of living adjustment has been the same. It's been 3% each of the last 2 years. And so that isn't a factor of feeling or emotion of, it's the value of the dollar being 3% different. And so, but there were years, after we first did a total compensation study in 2019, the first inflation data at that time was like 1.25%. And the select board said, we'll just do a step. We're not going to do a cost of living adjustment of 1%. We're just going to do a step. And so that is always a step progression, and a cost of living adjustment is always a discretionary decision of the select board. And so that's, I don't feel like it's automatic. So I wonder what we need to change about how this is teed up to make, you all and certainly the community feel like it isn't automatic.
it comes to us already in the budget. What are we supposed to think?
Well, we need to start somewhere. Right?
But maybe
I mean,
there's-
everything comes to you in the budget.
I'm a really good
But again, I
example
thought
of-
your question was almost silly. That where do we get that idea? It's from the budget.
That it's automatic.
Yeah.
So what would you, and so here's how the town used to operate. And you remember this, Peter. The town, for reviewing the budget, used to exclude all of the costs relative to wage increases through the whole process. And in the 11th hour, the budget committee and the select board considered what the budget could support for wage increases. And so the feedback from this budget committee, not these members, but this group, was that's a terrible way to approach budgeting, because generally the most significant cost increase that we're going to consider in a budget we're not even considering until the end of the process. And so the numbers are all there, right? Chapter 3 is full of any bit of information that you could want to understand how those costs are calculated, where employees exist, what the benefit costs are, and all those levers can be pulled, right? Looking at the assumptions page and understanding the right now, how we've done things traditionally is implementing wage increases in April following town meeting. There's a cost benefit in the first year to implementing wage increases in July instead of April, and splitting that cost increase over those 2 years, and benefit adjustments. So all of those levers can be pulled. The reason we did a total compensation study is to evaluate all of those components compared to the labor market and say, what's the appropriate position of the levers in order to be not top tier, right? For wages, they targeted 60th percentile, but that's more to reflect the difference between collecting data in 2025 and implementing it in 2026. But where do we position those levers to be comparable in the labor market? So I don't know what the alternative is other than to put as a starting point what the recommended wage increases are. But I'm happy to do something different for the 2027 budget.
Are the step raises automatic?
No,
No.
based on the satisfactory result of a performance evaluation.
Because in the public, in the public, the private and public, they're totally different calculations, right? So in the private sector, the labor market or whatever, they just see how much money they have. Based on that much money that they have, then they will have a compensation package. But of course, in the public, it's different.
The other important. Go ahead, Scott.
To say, I think that there are important parallels between private and public sectors. In private sector, when I was doing this, we would look at how much compensation we needed to increase based upon health insurance and market rates and things, as in a very competitive field, AI. But we also went out and looked at how much could we sell our product for, and that product sell was actually what limited us on how much we could raise, because we couldn't get the raises and the salary and benefit cost to outpace what we could actually charge customers. In this case, I would say the customers are the town's residents. And I think what I'm hearing here is just a concern of how do we make sure that the cost of compensation doesn't exceed what the town can bear. And I think there's no real easy way to do this, Connor. There's no magic bullet. This is always a very contentious and difficult issue.
I will say, I think I've been through a number of these in my history, 25 years in public service. This has been a conversation I think every agency has every single year at budget time. There is no easy bullet. I know our agency, we actually, because we have union shop, the management team did not have any raises for 5 years. That starts getting your pay scale out of whack, where some of the other employees, there's compensation, compression. I think the recommendations based upon the insurance information, I think that's a fair way for the town to spend money, save some money. Am I gonna like that? Husband gets his health insurance through the town. Personally, it's going to be a hit on our budget. But I think it's a fair way to assess it and move forward with some changes, because it is not sustainable, and this is something that could lead to being a little more sustainable.
Connor, you were talking about an example where if the
Private?
health insurance goes up 10%, and I think you said COLA at 2%, is that a one-time adjustment or does it carry forward?
Carries forward. Yep. So it would be compounding. So if the benchmark plan right now is 100% funded by the town, and those premiums go up 10%, and there's a 2% cost of living, then the new benchmark contribution would be 98%. And that would compound. If it was another 2% the next year, it'd be 96%. And that, I think that's a very impactful recommendation in terms of the balancing of total rewards and the concern about the ongoing cost. What we've experienced over the last couple of years is the town and ultimately the taxpayers have shared the vast majority of the burden of the increase in health benefit. And as a result, we ended up in a situation right now where even though our wages on average across all 40 classifications are about 11.5% lower than the labor market, our contribution, dollar for dollar, not coverage, not premium cost share, the real dollars spent on health benefit in Barrington are 10% higher than the studied labor market. We're out of balance, and we need to correct that balance. Now, yes, part of correcting that balance is bringing wages up from 11.5% below the market average to the market average, but a critical part of that calculation is bringing the cost to the health benefit that we're providing down and balancing that. And not only that, not only making the corrections proposed right now for coverage effective July 1st, 2026, but also instituting a mechanism to keep that from running away and to keep that in check in the future. And that's going to be just as challenging. And I appreciate your perspective of this, Scott. I have the pleasure of reviewing this information, considering implementation decisions, and to folks like you all on the select board and the residents, I have the responsibility to justify the support for the wage increases and the data that was provided, right? I have to turn also to the employees and explain how it's unsustainable that we've contributed to so much to our health benefit, and to the employees that are on that top tier plan that's proposed to go away, saying your health insurance is being canceled. Your plan will no longer be offered. And in place of that plan, we have this plan, which is similar. But here's the differences, and here's what the cost means to you. And oh, by the way, in future years, if you take Barrington's health benefit and premium cost increases continue to go up, which they very reasonably will, that's why we have to have these conversations, then you should expect that the wage increases that you're receiving, the cost of living portion of those will likely simply be diverted to your health benefit, to your contribution to the health benefit. And so it isn't, I feel like this is a balanced recommendation. I feel like it's data driven. It's not based on feelings and emotions. It's how do we reset and have a future-proof model to make sure that we don't run away, especially with our health benefit. Sorry, Mona, go ahead.
So have there been any consideration in looking into health savings accounts?
Yes. So two things. First, the health trust. We have kept a very close eye on the health market for the public sector. Very close, like remarkably close. Health Trust still offers us the best total package of health benefits, namely because of this transition back to a small group. We're pooled with all the other small groups. There's thousands of covered individuals, and the private market can't give us anywhere near the same rates for the same coverage and all the rest. One detriment to Health Trust is their HSA eligible plans are too expensive. And so what I had wanted to do, this was years ago, some of you might remember, talking about this. What I'd wanted to do, absent any compensation study or anything else, is just add a third plan option. We can have 3 with Health Trust that's HSA eligible. So if we hire, young police officer Bill Irving in, and maybe he's 22, but he's a military family and he's off his parents' health insurance. You're not eligible at 21. If your parents have insurance through the military, you're out. It's not 26, right? 22-year-old Army brat Bill Irving comes in, and he doesn't have any planned health utilization. He just cares about how much money he makes, and he's looking at the dollars and cents. I had wanted to offer somebody like him a health benefit that was a high deductible plan, and that we would take the difference of what we pay for the benchmark plan premium and put all of that money into an HSA for him. And I'd tell Bill, listen, this is another retirement account for you. You'll thank yourself later for doing that. 2 problems with that. First, the HSA eligible plan options through Health Trust are just too expensive. So there's not enough money on the table to really justify it. Second, Health Trust limits the contribution to health savings account to 50% of the premium cost. Pretty sure is the metric. But anyways, they wouldn't even allow us to put all the money in we would want to. So what the consultants recommended, which is a reasonable alternative to the idea we already had, which is there's this higher deductible plan option, which isn't HSA eligible, but there's a $3,000, $9,000 deductible. So premiums come way down, and the town funding the first 50% of the deductible utilization means that in those years where there's no health utilization, guess what? Who's to benefit? The town, because we'll make sure that money's available, but we don't need to spend that. And so I think that's a plan option that if offered, we won't likely see a lot of employees change to it because people are emotional about their health insurance and they don't frequently change. The employees covered on the top tier plan, they'll have to change under this proposal. They won't have a choice because their plan's going away. But just like we saw with the site of service plan, the benchmark plan, new employees will be able to consider that eyes wide open and say, okay, what's really best for me? So long answer, but I wish it was easier to offer an HSA eligible plan. Yep.
I know it's not the way most people think, but in my way of thinking, the health insurance would be a better benefit than the actual pay because it's not on your income tax.
Yep.
So
in my opinion, I'll be careful about, this doesn't impact employment decisions. But when I started in Barrington, we had a Cadillac plan and a Maserati plan. Those were the only health plan options we made available to employees. And we said for the Cadillac plan, we'll pay 85%, and for the Maserati plan, you pay the difference. And I came in, and here I am. My wife was 9 months pregnant, about to have my first child. We had some planned health utilization. And I looked at the Cadillac plan even, and I was like, that's too much health insurance for me. Like, I don't need that. It is too much of a plan for somebody that doesn't have a lot of planned health utilization. And so from my perspective, that does the town a very big disservice by we're only going to attract employees that need or plan on heavy health utilization. And so that's fine to offer that, but let's have an a la carte menu. Let's allow an employee that has, somebody like me, I'll share with you, I'm on the site of service plan, that benchmark plan, and it's perfect for my family, right? The 3 kids, the wife, it is a great balance of a plan option and excellent coverage levels. But I still don't think that's the whole equation, because remember back to the young strapping Bill Irving who's coming into the police department, this plan option, now, the town pays 100% of the premium, but he's responsible for all of the deductible. And okay, he gets, he sprains his ankle, running through the woods, not at work, for fun over the weekend, chasing his deer. And now all of a sudden he has his health utilization, he has immediate out-of-pocket costs. And for somebody like a young, healthy Bill Irving who doesn't care about, planned health utilization beyond that, the first 50% of the deductible will cover his sprained ankle. And now he won't have a premium cost share or a deductible contribution. And now we have something for all categories of employees. So for somebody that's looking for the strongest health benefit, we have an option for them. But for other employees, we have alternatives, which I think allow us to attract and retain a diverse workforce, which I think is essential. We're fortunate to have a diverse workforce now. I think we need to maintain that.
Connor, what about doing something where everybody gets the COLA in some percentage of employees are considered high levels, and they get a step increase or something like that as a way to adjust it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those types of compensation practices aren't uncommon in the public sector. Sometimes they're in the form of like a merit pool where the select board will establish a certain sum of money and say, this is how much you have. In some cases, they just apply it to all employees equally. In some cases, they build in performance metrics. It is in my opinion, that approach ends up with more drawbacks in the public sector than you might expect. In the private sector, a merit-based program like that allows you to highlight and advance high-performing employees in a very dynamic way. You don't have that same opportunity in the public sector. If somebody is going to be an extreme go-getter and workaholic, they're likely to be dissatisfied with the public sector's approach to recognizing that performance curve. In a community like Barrington, we don't have in very many positions opportunities for advancement. We're fortunate that people stay in their positions, and so we don't have a lot of turnover. So for those departments with 1, 2, 3 people, they can expect that their boss will be their boss for 10 years. And so the advancement isn't, they have to move to another community to advance. And so those compensation practices, I think, have a place in a community like Barrington. I think it removes the part of the package that we sell, which is stability. You have to perform, right? You have to perform or you don't grow or you're gone, right? And quite honestly, with very few exceptions, those employees who haven't qualified for a step increase due to poor performance, they haven't lasted long enough to see that play out, or to even the full year following, okay, you haven't received a pay increase. I mean, if people aren't performing, they're gone. It's not just a matter of not providing them a wage increase and then they stick around because they're not performing. If you're not performing, you're gone, and we find somebody that will perform and is interested in the package that we have to offer. So, but to your point, Scott, if some point in the future, in terms of a political decision, the select board said, listen, we can't afford a step increase for all employees. We're willing to fund a step increase for the top 50% of employees' performance. And so we'll make that money available, and it's up to supervisors to do that, to decide what the top 50% is. I wouldn't recommend that for the reasons I just stated, but that's certainly something that could be considered.
I want to make sure I've read the right parts of the report. They're recommending a 6.94% increase on labor.
That's the average.
And when would we see some benefit from Health Trust? Would that be July?
So that would take effect in July.
Okay. So the cost that they cite of $171,438 is not counting any benefit from Health Trust?
That's the net. So it does.
Oh, it does.
So that factors in the what costs more money and what costs less money.
So that would be in addition to the increase you've cited in your reports?
No. So what fortuitously, I will say, it was important to me, and I understand your point about it feels like the decision's made because it's already in our binders. But it was important to me that for reviewing the budget from the get-go, that we consider that there's likely a cost of wage increases for the 2026 operating budget. And so I essentially pretended that the total compensation study wasn't happening and said, what would we recommend in this year regardless? And that would be a step and a cost of living adjustment consistent with inflation. Fortuitously, that amount of money is within $1,000 of the implementation cost of these recommendations, the net of these recommendations. Now, the highway department, it being a union, those cost items will come out onto a separate warrant article. So for the actual operating budget, there's a net reduction of about $20,000 because that's a separate warrant article. Now, all along, we knew the police was going to be a separate warrant article, and there was no cost increase or wage increases in the original budget for them anyways because their contract's up. With the highway and transfer union, those cost items, the select board, as they've done in the past with compensation studies, will offer those increases to employees as a sidebar agreement, essentially, for that collective bargaining agreement. And those cost items will be separate. So if the highway and transfer were included, the difference is like $1,000 from what was already in the budget, but it's a separate warrant article for the cost items. So the net impact of implementing the recommendations of the compensation study on the 2026 operating budget are about $20,000. And you can see that on it's the third page, 19,343,000, the last entry on that page. So all the tax rate impact numbers, all of that factors in the implementing the total compensation study as recommended by the consultants. So that decision is far from made, but that's what these numbers reflect. And I will point out the police union. So Tracy Hardikoff was the select board representative to the union negotiations with the police union. We haven't met with the select board to sign the tentative agreement. We will bring that to them on the 1st, but we have reached an agreement on the collective bargaining team on the terms of the union contract, which include these, the recommendations from the total compensation study, the increases and the decreases. So in terms of approving ground for discussing the changes in benefits to employees and understanding those impacts, we've had an opportunity to do that. And it was favorable, folks agreed. Other things on the total compensation study?
I think we beat it to death.
I think the select board, if the group is willing, I think the select board is interested in an honest, recommendation with these caveats, or recommendation with consideration for this in future years. I think the select board wants to hear from this group. Last year, when the budget committee reviewed the recommendations and the voter guide, right? The one concern the budget committee had was we need to study wages, we need to study total compensation and make sure we're where we're supposed to be. Make sure we're where is appropriate. And so, I think the select board wanted to be responsive to that. And so I do think they value this group's opinion.
I think this was be careful what you ask for. Because you might not like
I mean,
the answer.
Yeah.
We did ask this
It's
last
good
year.
to know. Yeah, well, and I appreciate you being a
That's
strong
just what was in
advocate
the
for
budget.
employees as well, Connor.
Add the numbers. It's 5.5, not 5.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to look at that. So those numbers are calculated separately. Like this number is a calculation of all total wages added up. So like these numbers, the comparison between these numbers and those numbers. So I'll have to look and see where, actually I can tell you probably why. Peter pointed out in the history of wage increases that's in the budget binder in chapter 3. In those years where there's been a recommendation for a step increase, which is 2.5%, and a cost of living adjustment, which is 3%, the average wage increase number listed is 5%. And the reason is, and something I wanted to mention earlier that we need to keep in mind, with a step system like this, people reach the top step of the plan and stop receiving increases. So those employees at the top of the plan aren't receiving a 2.5% increase. They're just receiving a 3% cost of living adjustment, or 2.5% step increase. So that would be the delta between what would look like 5.5% and the fact that some people are only getting 3. So that brings the average down to 5.
Years ago, we did have a longevity stipend for those who were off the grid. And that was given up, I assume, at some point.
We don't have that.
Yeah, but years ago we did.
Yep.
It was modest. It was $500, but the consultants are talking about, I think, $800 to $1,150 or something.
So they didn't make a specific recommendation for implementation right now, but they reported on what the longevity numbers of the labor market were. And I think in future years, if we realize that we have, 10% of our employees at the top of their scales, and, the select board would need to consider something like that to be able to continue retaining them. One value of keeping the pay plan, minimum and maximum, consistent with the labor market, is we're saying this is what we're willing to pay for this job function. And as it moves up, that gives incumbent employees additional room for growth in their job roles, which helps prevent the need for things like longevity, consideration for longevity bonuses. So yes, there's nothing in the current compensation practices for longevity or in the proposal.
Thanks. Okay, are we ready to move on? Finally.
Should we make a recommendation for implementing the recommendations and or with any adjustments either now or in future years.
Trying to figure out
My
how to word it.
my recommendation is that the select board should really evaluate what the market, our taxpayers can bear.
How would you recommend doing that?
Well, that's where I come back to. I think it's ultimately a political decision, and um, only they really can own that.
I mean, I think they're prepared to own it, but in support of making data-driven decisions, the select board's invested in an objective review, an objective third-party review of wages and benefits, and a set of recommendations to make corrections, lowering where we're rich and raising where we're poor, and implement that. So, I mean, I think the select board's prepared to own all the decisions that they make, but if it was this group that said, we want you to do this, I feel like it would be a little bit passing the buck, even if it's that you don't agree. I mean, I don't think it has to be, the budget committee doesn't have to say, yes, we think you should do this. But if you don't think the select board should implement this, I think you should tell them that, especially where it was this group that asked that this process be undertaken. And again, if it's implemented as recommended, but in future years, the compensation practices of step and cost of living should be criticized more than they have been in the past, or the town should evaluate a merit-based step program where it's not just satisfactory performance evaluation, it's exceeding expectations, or whatever the recommendation may be, but it doesn't just have to be recommend implementation and that's that.
That should be given, that should be based on merit.
Well, I mean, it is based on merit in terms of a performance evaluation, but it's meeting expectations. That's the metric for.
That's minimum.
And again, employees that aren't are gone. We don't have employees that aren't receiving wage increases or aren't meeting expectations because they're placed on performance improvement plans and either leave or are fired or are counseled out because they're not performing. I mean, that's how we.
Connor, what is our turnover rate?
Very low. It's hard to give a number that's meaningful because of the variability in departments, right? Because the fire department last year, we spent 8 months where 3 of our full-time positions were empty. And so it would be disingenuous to apply that turnover and vacancy rate to the whole town because that pulls the whole thing down. The employees that we're seeing leave, that the town doesn't want to see them leave, are generally in our police and fire departments, and they're generally, I don't want to say shopping agencies, but they're progressing their career in ways that we can't offer. And so we are very fortunate, and I think the support from the community and the select board has resulted in generally low turnover. Vacancy rates are higher, but they're higher in the non-benefited positions. Like we have a deputy building inspector position right now that we haven't been able to fill sustainably. And so, I don't think a townwide number provides much value.
When do they need a recommendation by?
They're considering this group's recommendation on the 1st, on Monday.
Today.
Yep.
So they need it today.
Yep. So
what's the hesitancy with people not? Yeah, what is your hesitancy to not recommend it?
I guess after this discussion, I'd like to go back over it, reread it, and dig through it again and see if there's anything I missed.
Yep, makes sense.
I would say for the future, it should be not meeting, it should be exceeding.
What, please?
Step increases should be exceeding
Increases.
expectations, not meeting expectations. Yep.
Well,
then it becomes automatic.
I would be interested in hearing other options. I mean, creative options. I don't know. It's hard for me to make a decision today as well. I don't have all my stuff here. I didn't have a chance to see the compensation study till I had already left on all of it.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm happy, through the minutes to summarize the questions and comments the budget committee made about the total compensation study with ultimately it's a, political decision by the select board. And, I mean, is there an opinion that there's, valuable data collected for decision making? Like what's the,
As I said, I didn't like the towns. Newmarket is very unique to us. Somersworth and Wyndham, I haven't checked them all yet, but to me, there are some real outliers in that list. And so I don't like the list. I like the report. Again, I think I agree with some of the comments made that I think 5.5% every year or 2.5 plus COLA every year is unsustainable. It just puts us in a position where the town is spending beyond certain individuals' means. And, I don't want to see somebody have to move out of town because they can't afford it.
Great. And so your concerns, and I want to put words in your mouth, so I want to repeat this, make sure I understand. Your concerns are more to do with future implementation.
Correct.
Of growth of wages.
Right.
And I don't think that is an unreasonable concern at all.
I think that's what Farida was saying too.
And so, maybe something that this group can spend time on between now and the development of the next budget cycle is concrete recommendations. And to Scott's point about an alternative, I don't know if you're talking about an alternative of total compensation in general or just an alternative to the annual wage increase cycle, which, I mean, the recommendation of this total compensation study are to maintain the compensation practices of a pay plan, step progression, et cetera. And that's what the labor market uses also. But if there's consideration from this group to look at how do we do that different in a way that this group feels will be more sustainable, and let's spend time on that, in preparation for the 2027 budget development.
Barrington needs to find another source of revenue.
Good luck.
Farida,
I will point out that Barrington is an absolute outlier in the fact that our 50% of our annual operating budget is funded by non-property tax revenue. That is remarkable. And so, the fact that we're not just straddling property taxpayers with the cost to fund our municipal government makes Barrington very unique already. And so that, and again, if we're talking about impact to taxpayers, we cannot lose sight of the fact that Barrington remains in the bottom 10% of municipal organizations in terms of the share of the property taxes. And so, yes, this means growth. Yes, this costs money. Yes, paying our people comparable wages costs money year over year. But that doesn't explode our budget. We're talking about right now, our municipal property tax rate is $3.39, right? Look at any of the communities that you're concerned about, and you'll find that Barrington is individually low for dollars per thousand, proportionally low in terms of the total share of the property taxes. And so, and again, looking at actual property taxes paid to the municipality, 2014 to 2024, we're talking about a decrease of real dollars paid in property taxes to the municipality. And so the modest growth that we're experiencing on the municipal side will not take us out of those metrics for municipal operations. Now, we cannot at this table protect the property tax impact, protect taxpayers of the property tax impact of the school. And we can't reduce our level of service or make funding decisions for our employees or others to combat the increases of the school in order to try to balance the tax rate when we're 15 or 16%. We can't. It's a losing battle. You know, you're trying to bail out of aircraft carrier with a teaspoon.
I did a look at the last 6 years of the allocation of county, town, and school, and it's actually been very consistent. So you can say the school's going up, but for our percentages to stay the same means the town's gone up too.
And the town has. But the important part of that metric, Peter, is that the town's growth in both, compared to both the property tax base and the increase in non-property tax revenue, has been much more sustainable, which is why the real dollars paid, not the rate, not the comparison of the rate, because the rate changes with values and everything else, but the actual taxes paid in our local tax effort has been much more sustainable.
So I gave AI the state listing of municipal tax rates, and it turns out we're 38 out of 120 in ranking so we're the 38th lowest out of 120. So we are low. I think as well, taxing, putting in all of our education and municipal taxes and property taxes is an unfair way to go. And I think that hurts our employees as well, because it certainly hits the bottom rung of residents in our town, where they're paying the bottom 20% pay effective tax rate three times more than the top. But that's the government people want, and that's how we want it. A lot of people want us to fund the government, so it's in some ways we're getting what we asked for.
Okay, unless there's any motion that anybody wants to make, we'll move on from the compensation study.
Everybody willing to wait?
Well, we're not waiting for anything. I mean, we're just saying select board make a decision.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, operating budget. So starting at the beginning of your packet, and Scott, for your benefit, I'll get it up on the screen here, although I know I sent you the documents, but I'll just, so we can all be looking at the same thing. I'm looking at document 1A. So this is a summary of the operating budget proposal as it exists right now. Again, we already talked about the tax rate impact, but for the operating budget, we're looking at a $463,000 increase, or 4.69%.
And that's including the labor, the
Implementation of the compensation study as recommended. Okay. If we look at the next page, this is document 1D in the table of contents.
They aren't labeled though.
In the table of contents, I mean, I'm just.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But you're doing the right thing with the next page. This is the 2026 budget process changes summary by function. And so this shows where the money came from and went during our review process. So we pulled about $100,000 out of the budget. That's about 1%. The biggest chunk of money came out of paving. Remember, we're using that SB 401 road money. Another chunk of money came out of the election wages, that $20,000 up top. And then you'll see some of the wage adjustments for the separate financial warrant articles to fund the cost items for the total compensation on police and the Highway Transfer Station Union. Okay, moving on from that, we have document 1DI, which is a detailed list of all the changes that were made. So we see all the money that went out, and this is from the initial budget proposal. All the money that we took out of the budget and the money we had to add back in. So the money we added back in, you'll see the $18,000 for the park maintenance into the operating budget. You'll see through the process, we always budget for our incumbent employees, You'll see there's a few census changes in there. Sometimes that's we hired an employee at a lower wage rate than the person that left, or we hire an employee that has a different health election than somebody that left. And so that always swings the budget a little bit. We always try to make sure the budget proposal reflects the current census of employees in their health elections. Okay. Moving on from this, the default budget. So for the first time this year, we provided you a copy of the default budget from the beginning. We went through and updated this based on current proposals. And the default budget is $10,186,851, which is $167,000 less than the operating budget proposal, which is a difference of about 1.62%. Okay, moving on, or actually that's the operating budget. The next documents relate to warrant articles. So that's a reflection of all the recommendations that this group has made along the way, adjustments to the operating budget and other changes we've made. Are there any other changes the advisory budget committee would like to recommend to the operating budget?
We couldn't implement any change in the step process at this point.
Well, there's no steps. We're nuking the existing plan and implementing a new plan. And there are costs for placing the employees in the new plan, right? Because people are moving up and, there's criteria listed in the report.
So everyone's going to go into that new matrix they presented?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So there's no wage adjustments other than that, I guess is the point.
Gotcha.
So employees, as proposed, employees would be paid under the current system through April, and then starting in April, they'd be paid in the new system. And then as we discussed, the biggest benefit change, which is the health benefit reductions, would take effect in July. And that's just because that's our plan year.
Any comments on the operating budget?
I have none.
Okay, we should vote in favor of the operating budget. Scott?
Yeah, Connor, can you remind me just one more time? So this operating budget is inclusive of all of the police and fire increases as well as regular employee increases.
No, there's a separate warrant article for the police union cost items of the collective bargaining agreement.
Okay.
So the cost items for collective bargaining agreement have to be approved on a separate warrant article by town meeting. And so that warrant article is a 70. Oh no, this document doesn't show the ending. I need to print a new document. And the PDF is going to be wrong also. This shows the initial, not the final. My apologies. But there's a $70,828 warrant article for the police union cost items.
Okay.
Yep.
And so in essence, people are voting here on that budget increase. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yep, of course. So if you're ready, Peter was looking for a vote. Oh, sorry, another
That
question.
last discussion got me wondering. In the list of warrant articles, there's a $30,000 police collective bargaining agreement.
That was a placeholder. It should say placeholder, does it?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So it's now 70,800 or is it 100,800?
Nope, it's 70,800.
Okay.
Yep, that's
Thanks.
replace that. And I'm going to print you this document. I apologize that my print area didn't have what I needed there.
Okay. So on the operating budget, Scott? Oh, Scott?
I'm here. Come back to me. I'm looking
Okay,
at something
Mona?
else here.
Aye.
Rita?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm going to say no.
Okay. Is there anything you want to see changed, Peter? Recommend the select board change.
I just would like to see it closer to the cost of living. That's been my gripe. That was my gripe last year, is the increase is significantly more than the cost of living. And I don't think that's sustainable. I've said that right along.
Is there a recommendation of something you'd like to see cut from the budget to bring it closer to the 3% cost of living? So we would be looking at 9,890,708 times 0.0. That's 300,000. So we'd be looking at about 160,000
Yeah,
to pull 100, that's about the difference with the default budget if you look
Correct.
at it. So
that's why I voted no.
yeah. So 160,000, where would you recommend to the select board to pull the 160,000 from? I mean, I think you probably are more familiar with the operating budget proposal than they are. The select board has deferred the review to this group for that purpose. So where could we recommend to pull out 160,000 to get it closer to the cost of living?
Well, highway's always an easy mark because it's such a big budget.
Okay.
Um,
Do we want to look at that chapter?
I don't want to take the time to do it now.
I mean, that's why we're here, though. I think what I heard from the select board last year is that they are interested in the changes to the operating budget that may allow it to be a budget that's the budget committee is willing to support. And so and we've done this process every year, right? You know, Steve Saunders, John Morris, and you know, back. If there are things that we want to consider changing or removing, let's consider them. I mean, that's why we go through the budget line item by line. So we could take more money out of paving, salt and sand's another big one. You know,
Yeah, I don't think we can take money out of salt and sand.
I don't think we can take money out of paving either, because you're gonna run into deferred maintenance and you start that whole cycle again. My opinion.
I agree with Peter that I would love to see this committed, the whole thing at cost of living, instead of this constant, you know, explosion. Well, maybe not explosion, but a steady rise.
understand.
But again, where to take it out of is always, you know, the devil's in the details, and where to pull the money out is.
This is the last second that you cannot pull the money out of anywhere because we already discussed everything.
Is
So,
there any
Amy-
way to bring people up to the wage scale in 2 increments? Instead of at once I'm just trying to think of creative ways here.
Yeah, so you could delay implementation to like July, where people would stay on their current wage rates through July 1st. And then, you know, the first pay period in July is when the pay increases would take effect. So that approach gives you one-time relief, right? Because you're funding the additional 50% in the next year. And so that would take money out of the 2026 budget. Absolutely would reduce the 2026 budget. But I think it's probably a short-sighted approach, because unless in 2027 you implemented wage increases in September, you know, so like these are your wages for, these are your wages for 16 months and, you know, then you do a different one.
And you know, that retention rate of employees we were talking about is so good here. You start doing that, people aren't gonna,
But that's not a good.
that's not fair. We already have, the compensation study showed we're 11% under the 60 percentile.
Have you ever investigated the 2.5% between part-time people and full-time people?
Having the wage increases be higher for one than the other?
Or none for part-time?
Yeah, so I guess I haven't studied it in that exact way, but we've spent a tremendous amount of time trying to understand the difference between our full-time and part-time positions, because the vast majority of our turnover outside of public safety, which is full-time positions anyways, has been our part-time positions. And employees really have no incentive to stay in a part-time position. Our wages are not great compared to the alternative, and they don't get any benefits. And so we offer a really great and competitive package to an employee for a full-time position because they have a retirement system, they have health benefits. Part-time position, we offer the same wages, but we don't retain them because they have no reason to stay. They want to come and get trained up maybe, they come and we've seen it happen in building inspection. And so the cost to provide wage increases to part-time employees is nominal, and compared to the total compensation, it's insignificant, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Back to salt and sand, in winter contractors, we have an emergency road repair capital reserve, which we have a couple $100,000 in case we have a really bad winter. We've never had to spend from that, knock on wood. But if we were looking to get this budget to the cost of living adjustment, we could defer those operating budget costs to the capital reserve. A detriment in doing that is you reduce your default budget for the next year, right? So if you take $100,000 out of salt and sand, now your default budget for this upcoming year is $100,000 less, and then for the next year, it's $100,000 less. So if you get a default budget and you've used half of your capital reserve, you'll pretty quickly use up the rest of it, which again, that's why, we haven't recommended doing that. But just in terms of creative thinking.
That's what I was thinking, but then it's always catch-22.
Can we reduce our unassigned fund balance down? Some of that out of there? This is down a little bit lower than the recommendations.
So yes, we could change our unassigned fund balance policy. I think our treasurer would have a strong opinion of that because our cash flow right now is low single digits of the millions, because we use unassigned fund balance. We have about $1.7 million in outstanding reimbursement from grants. We've been very aggressive in pursuing alternative funding sources, but we have to front load those costs. We pay those costs up front, and once the project's done, we get reimbursed. And so we're $1.7 million, and that's unassigned fund balance that we're spending. We have cash flow so we can spend that, so we can do that. But reducing our balance from 12.5% puts that a lot tighter. We couldn't do it for the purposes of the operating budget. We could only do it to reduce so if you look at the tax rate setting document, the second to last one, you'll see the entry for fund balance to reduce taxes. So if our tax effort is going up, let me get this open here. If our tax effort is going up 608,000 and we choose to use 608,000 of unassigned fund balance at tax rate setting in 2026, our tax rate won't change at all. The problem is when you shift all of those numbers to the column on the left and we're looking at 2027, if we don't contribute another 608,000 then, we're going to have to make up that 608,000 and whatever the next year's increases are, which is why, we don't do that. But it certainly can be done. Amy and I go ahead, Scott, sorry.
I think my ultimate challenge here, and why I don't think there's any place in the budget to take money out of, is that if you look at the cost, the increase of non-personnel costs, as we talked about, is less than the cost of inflation. So in essence, in many cases, our operating budget is probably going backwards in terms of effective buying power. So it really, we're simply talking about employees. And so it's hard, that's where it's hard to look at the operating budget and say, I approve. And I don't know. I think I'm on the fence. I guess we do need to, if we have to make a decision, I'd probably say yes. But I think we need to have a discussion with the select board.
Okay. What I was going to say is Amy and I every year we look at this budget not only during budget development, but every single day. We're looking at every line item and scrutinizing, right? And we have optimized our operations to the nth degree, right? Our people are our services, and our people cost money. And where we have been able, to Scott's point about, where we're going backwards, very proudly, I will tell you that we have been able to find operational cost savings in non-personnel costs by having and training our people to be more effective, to do a better job, to do more with less. And so, yes, our operational costs might be going backwards on inflation, but that's a source of pride. That's because we've invested in our people to provide excellent level of service for, under a lot of financial pressure. And so, yeah, Amy and I, have looked at the budget from every angle to find where the opportunities are to be creative or make reductions. And over the last few years, we've done that, right? And looking for ways like pulling out one-time expenditures and using alternative funding. That's an excellent way to do that. But we've done those things, and this is our result. So I'm happy to consider any proposal to find, more money to pull out of the budget.
The problem is where to find the money. I mean, this stuff is all needed. You guys have done a good job with it.
But this is bare bones, in my opinion.
That's the problem I have. I mean, I voted for it, but it's again like last year. I'll vote for it. I don't like it, but it is.
Do you have any sense? Do you have any sense of where the school's going to be at this year in terms of a percentage increase?
I do not.
It is what it is right now.
Yeah.
And Peter, please don't misinterpret. I'm not trying to get you to change your decision, but if the select board last year, they wanted to know what could we do different. And so if there's something you'd like to see done different, let's do it. And if not, then we'll just carry the vote as it is. But when it comes to the voter guide, we're going to need a comment in the voter guide of the dissenting opinion, which I think is really valuable for folks. And if I just wish that it was closer to cost of living, then that can be what the comment is. But
that's exactly my motivation. And again, anything the board wanted to do that made up close to that 167,000, I'd be very ecstatic about, but I don't think they will.
But point them in a direction. That was my only point. But we can move on from that. Unless you had anything, Peter?
Nope.
Okay.
Peter, are you essentially suggesting that we don't move people up into the wage study? Is that essentially rates?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Are you essentially saying that we shouldn't be adhering to the new rates at the wage study? Is that ultimately what you're saying? Because that results in an effective high increase?
No, if it's pretty much a wash with the change in health insurance, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
Okay. So Peter, you already voted. You're no.
Yes.
Scott, you didn't vote.
Yes.
Okay. So warrant articles. So what we have, and I apologize, this wasn't in the first printout or PDF that I sent you yesterday.
Are we voting on the warrant articles moving forward?
Yes.
I unfortunately have another meeting I have to go to, so.
Okay. Is there anything you want to see changed?
No, I think we've.
Okay.
Yeah, I can go ahead and approve the warrant articles as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
You want to start voting?
We're going to do them as a block. I'd
Sure.
rather do them individually.
Is there anyone that anybody is going to vote on different? And this isn't your recommendation votes right now. We'll do that after the public hearing, but this is just to send them to the select board. So is there any one you want to pull off and vote on separate? I'm seeing.
I have a question about the dam repair.
Okay.
Specific projects in mind for the.
Well, it's 0.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong thing.
I guess park and recreation, I guess,
0.
is it 0?
Get put in, get put in the
Did it to
budget.
operating budget.
Okay, good, because I don't know why it says.
Mona,
here.
your recommendation for
That was
those
my only
articles to move forward?
problem.
Yes on all of them? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for being here, Mona.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No, I was just saying goodbye.
I thought in the select board's discussion, there was something that was going to get shifted from somewhere else to cover the library technology.
Yes, the closing of the library community center capital reserve. So that's the minus 28,000. So those will be contingent warrant articles, where the first question will be to close the library community center capital reserve. And the second one, contingent on approval of the first, will be to add 15 of that 28 to the
Oh,
library
okay.
technology.
All right, I got it.
Yep.
So I'm okay with the block.
Okay. Scott, vote on the block.
Yep, yeah,
Rita?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So we have that, and then it's just the unassigned fund balance documents back here, just for your exposure. You see the 137,000 we use this year to reduce taxes. You see our unassigned fund balance position. We estimate right now about $425,000 to be added to unassigned fund balance. And so then if you look at the next document, you'll see that 2026 number that shows where we expect the regular general fund operating expenditures to be, what our balance percentage is, which is 12.9, which that's where we get that $161,075 that we estimate in surplus unassigned fund balance that we can put towards taxes next year. You'll remember on the first page, we estimated 350,000 this time last year, and we added 349,840. I don't want to toot my and Amy's horn, but that's pretty damn close.
toot away.
Okay with me?
Okay, any questions on the fund balance stuff?
Nope.
Okay. I have revenue in here also. I told you, we take another pass through. We look at collections to date. You see reductions in interest on investments. You see an increase in meals and rooms tax based on actuals for this year. And you see some growth in motor vehicle registrations. But the net impact for what revenue was used to set the taxes this year is small. Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay.
We all set on the revenue?
And then it's just the tax rate impact information, if that all makes sense to everybody. I fear, just because I have, we've gone over it so much, I fear that the presentation of the operating budget with no tax rate impact will be confusing to people because it's an increase. Now, the numbers, because we've gotten to a point where our separate financial warrant articles are all funded by the tax rate, I don't see any other way to do that other than to distribute that prior year tax rate increase to the warrant articles. Otherwise, you'd be overinflating the increase, in the warrant article. Any strong opinions about that?
I'm not sure I follow what,
So on this page, the tax rate impact by warrant article, the operating budget is estimated to have no increase because the operating budget, if approved, is $3.26
right,
on the tax rate, whereas the current rate is $3.39.
okay,
So we're in the situation for the first time where our prior year rate is higher than the new budget
right,
total proposal
for the operating system,
for the operating budget.
right,
And that also proportionally applies the prior year use of unassigned fund balance and the additional warrant articles that were approved, just proportionally across the warrant articles. And that's why you see that like the highway heavy equipment is 13 cents of the total tax rate, but it's only 9 cents as an increase over the current year rate.
So that's what you want to explain.
Well, okay. Well, yeah, I don't know. That's what I'm trying to explain. I mean, that's what the data is.
Right.
But I feel like it's confusing because on its face, you see a warrant article for a budget that's a $400,000 increase and it's no increase to the taxes. That confuses people. You look at a $300,000 appropriation, which will make up 13% or 13 cents on the tax rate, but the actual increase is only 9 cents over the current rate, which is always how we've done it. What's the increase from where we are right now? So,
I would be a coward and not put the column of estimated increase to the tax rate. Again, I think it's simple enough to say the 367 is 28 cents more than last year.
yeah,
Leave it at that. I think that's just too MI,
TMI, yeah.
too much information.
And yeah, I don't disagree with you, although I feel like different data resonates with people differently. I'm really glad that we added the portion of the estimated total rate, the second numbers column there. But anyways, marinate on it. If you have opinions, we've got plenty of time to discuss before we finalize the voting guide and stuff, but I just wanted to point that out. Okay. So on the first, we will summarize these recommendations for the select board. On the first, I think it's possible that the select board is prepared to just finalize the operating budget proposal and warrant. Because it doesn't sound like there's anything outstanding here. I don't think the select board is going to have anything that they want the budget committee to go back to and look at in depth. So we'll summarize that proposal. Certainly, you're all invited to be there if you're available. Hopefully you'll be there, Peter, if
It's
you're
on the
available.
first?
On the first,
On the first.
in this room,
Will it
6:30.
be early in the agenda?
It will be at the beginning of the agenda. Yep,
Sometimes things drag on and on.
yep,
What time is that?
6:30.
6:30.
Yep. I think the only thing ahead of it is just the standing update from the school board liaison, which hopefully they'll provide an update on the budget.
That would be great.
Yep. So, okay,
And I'll be there.
fantastic. Thank you, Scott.
I would move we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
You want to hang on there, Scott?